I'm Dr. Mollie Marti. Welcome to Resiliency Matters. This is where we take the big resiliency research and best practices and break it down into tiny bite-sized pieces that you can begin using immediately at home, at school, in your communities. If we shared with you a tool that would help you feel like you're no longer an imposter, a fraud in your life, that you're actually as capable and intelligent as other people know you to be, would you spend the next 28 minutes with us? If we could give you an immediately usable tool so that you could own your success and help others that you love in your life help own their success, would you hang out with us? Who is us? Today, the other part of us is the fabulous Dr. Valerie Young, and we are here to talk about the Impostor Syndrome. I want to introduce you to Dr. Valerie's book. It's The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women. This is an important subtitle, Why Capable People Suffer from the Impostor Syndrome and How to Thrive in Spite of It. Dr. Young is an international author, speaker, and leading expert on the imposter syndrome. So welcome.
I'm thrilled to be here.
I've heard that this book is now in 5 different languages, including it went into Slavic languages.
Yes,
Russian.
It's in Czech and being reprinted in Russian in the Ukraine.
Fabulous. Congratulations on that. How exciting. So let's start, I think, with the number one question that everybody at home is already asking. What is the imposter syndrome?
Well, this was a term that was coined by 2 psychologists, Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes out of Georgia in the 1970s. And what they found was that despite evidence to the contrary, and often overwhelming, compelling evidence to the contrary, a lot of very intelligent, bright, capable people felt like they were fooling people. They had a difficult time internalizing and really owning their accomplishments and successes, and they thought they were fooling people and they were going to be found out.
And you have a personal story, which I love. It makes it so relevant and really put you on a mission to learn about this and share it with others. What was your first introduction to that imposter syndrome?
Well, for me, I was actually sitting in a class. I was probably 26 years old. I was in a doctoral program at the University of Massachusetts. And somebody brought in a paper on the imposter phenomenon that these 2 psychologists had written and started talking about all these people who feel like they're frauds and they're going to be found out. And I sat there nodding my head like a little bobblehead doll going, oh my God, that's me. And when I looked around the room, all the other graduate students were nodding their head. And this was shocking because these were my role models. These were people I looked up to. And yet we all felt this way.
And you even saw your instructor, I remember reading at that time, nodding her head as well.
Yeah, we all got it.
Okay, so this created an aha moment. What did you do with that? What was the next step that led to your research?
Well, we actually started a little imposter support group with the other graduate students, and we started talking about our intellectual fraudulence and how we're fooling our professors. But what happened was about 3 weeks in, I started to have this nagging sense that even though they were saying they were imposters, I was pretty sure I was the only real imposter. But I really became so fascinated by this subject. It's not logical. These are intelligent, capable people. Why do we feel this way? So I decided to change my whole dissertation topic and focus on that general topic. And I've been researching it for 25 years.
I love that. You felt like you were the only real fake, is what I'm hearing.
Exactly. They were phony imposters.
All right. So you did dissertation research that led to workshops. Kind of walk us through some of that.
Yeah, my dissertation was on the broader subject of women's self-limiting patterns and philosophies that lead us to feel like imposters.
Okay.
In the very beginning, they thought this was a uniquely female experience, and that's where I was coming from when that was the understanding. But they very quickly learned that there's a lot of men who feel like imposters as well. But I just started putting up posters and doing workshops, and people were showing up in droves. And I realized I'm onto something. And, since then I've spoken to over 60,000 people at IBM, Merck, Procter & Gamble, Chrysler, Boeing, all over the world.
You see a lot of head nodding.
A lot of head nodding.
Yeah. And we'll talk about some of those individual differences between men and women. We're very interested at the Resiliency Matters shows on teens and youth and creating stronger youth. So we'll talk about those individual differences. But one thing we promise our audience is that we pretty quickly get to these tools. So I want to start moving into tool number one. What is the starting point? If this is resonating with people at home and they're thinking, she's talking about my life, I hear her talking about her life, but this is how I feel. That, people say, good job, and you're so smart, or you're so funny, or you're so anything, and you think, oh, they're not talking about me. I guess I want to ask one question to kind of specify, what is the difference between imposter syndrome and low self-esteem?
That's actually a great question, because a lot of people assume imposter syndrome is just a fancy word for low self-esteem, but they're really different. Not to get too technical about it, but low self-esteem is more of a global sense you might have about yourself, but imposter feelings really only come up in achievement situations. You don't feel like an imposter when you're petting your dog or you're doing the laundry.
Okay.
It's related to school, work, if you own a business. So in those kinds of arenas, that's when the feelings come up.
So achievement-focused, competitive environments.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so that's very helpful. So let's move toward tool number one. What is an important first step if you do feel like a fraud at work, at school, you feel that you're not nearly as accomplished as people may seem to think you are? What are those first steps?
I think it's largely a reframing process that needs to go on. One of the things research has found is that nobody likes to fail, Molly, but people who experience imposter feelings, they have shame when they fail because they feel like they shouldn't fail. They have these very high self-expectations for themselves around being a perfectionist or an expert, feeling like they need to know everything there is to know. And so we need to kind of reframe that to realize that everyone fails, and it's about learning from your failure, so to fail forward. Or to reframe, even challenge. The old imposter mental script would be, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm doing, right? When something feels big or hard. And the new script needs to be reframed to say, wow, I'm really going to learn a lot. And to focus on the learning value and not on the anxiety part of it.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
I have to say that we were dancing. This is a new show, so I'm stretching and I'm learning. And that was one thing that my first guest, after we got done filming, we were off camera and she kind of exclaims, oh my gosh, you're a learner. Meaning we had fun with it. We were just finding our way forward. We knew it wouldn't be perfect.
Right.
And so kind of bringing that attitude. And I can certainly say that was not always my attitude. You can tell enough alphabet soup behind my name that I was certainly a high achieving, focused on perfectionist. And I've had to break a lot of those patterns over time.
Yeah, and you have to be willing to figure it out as you go along. And that goes back to the expectation. There's the kind of person I call the natural genius. And somehow they got it in their head that if I was really smart, everything would be innate and effortless. I wouldn't have to struggle. I'd come out of the womb knowing how to do advanced calculus or know how to do a TV show. How would you know until you do it? You've got to do the stuff first and then fall down, get up, keep going, learn from it, and get better as you go along.
The natural genius. That is one of your 4 competence types. We're going to talk more about those when we come back. So tip number 1, reframe failure by focusing on effort and growth. Another thing we're covering when we come back, quotes by some famous people that will blow your mind. They blew my mind. We'll share them coming up next. I'm Dr. Mollie Marti. Welcome back to Resiliency Matters. Today I'm speaking with Dr. Valerie Young, a leading expert on the impostor syndrome. We are going to get to these 4 competence types that we were talking about, but I came across some quotes on your website and they really blew my mind, and I want to share them with our viewers at home. You play along, see if you can guess who is saying this. Here's a direct quote. I have written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're going to find me out now. I've run a game on everybody, and they're going to find me out.
Maya Angelou.
Maya Angelou. Another one. At any time, I still expect that the no-talent police will come and arrest me.
Mike Myers.
Mike Myers, the funny guy. You think, why would anyone want to see me again in a movie? And I don't know how to act anyway, so why am I doing this?
Meryl Streep, the most Academy Award nominated actor or actress of all time.
And one last one we'll share. I worry that people are going to realize that I'm a great fraud and it will end. And that was MSNBC host Rachel Maddow.
Oh, Rachel Maddow.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
So, we're going to be talking later in our segment about normalizing and the importance of that. But if that doesn't help normalize for people, these are extraordinary, highly accomplished people.
Yeah.
And they're walking around in this world just waiting for the house of cards to crumble.
Yeah, waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah. So that's really was impactful to me, and thankful to you that I could share that with our viewers. I want to continue to talk before we go back to those competent times, just about some individual differences. My background is in personality and social psych, and so I look at a lot of the differences. This book is geared towards successful women, but you mentioned men also suffer from the imposter syndrome. What are you finding both in your research and in practice with men? And also, let's talk about women, and are there reasons why they suffer more, if they do, from the imposter syndrome?
Well, the research is not conclusive. There are studies that find that women feel it more. There's studies that find that women and men feel it equally. And there's one study where they found men felt it more, and that was with college professors, which makes sense because they're in academia and there's certain elements of that kind of culture that might lead them to feel that way. But, my experience is that it holds women back more. Okay. And I think we are more susceptible, Molly, because there is research that shows that girls and women globally, cross-culturally, are more likely to internalize failure and mistakes and criticism, and boys generally. Now, you're always generalizing, right, when you talk about differences, but generally are more likely to blame factors outside of themselves. So there's this great cartoon, this woman's trying on a pair of pants. She said, hey, I must be getting fat. Then there's guys trying on a pair of pants, and you say, hey, there must be something wrong with these pants. That kind of sums it up. So I do think that for women, we set the bar pretty high for ourselves. We feel like we need to know 150% before we dare start our business or raise our hand or go after a promotion. And guys are more used to kind of jumping in and going, I'll just figure it out as I go along.
That brought to mind my son. So a guy, he has started in college, and he said to me yesterday, what is this with girls raising their hand? He goes, I haven't raised my hand since 8th grade. If I have something to contribute or ask, and he said, I just kind of jump in. And he goes, I'm in college now, and the girls are still raising their hand. He said this to me yesterday. Yeah. I thought, interesting.
Yeah.
Isn't that?
Yeah, we like to follow those rules.
Yes, we've been socialized. So that's one difference. And you speak a lot in universities and colleges. What are you finding among the younger guys versus the girls or the women? Because that's getting us closer to the teens. And again, a lot of our listeners are parenting those older teens.
Right.
Anything that...
Well, I can tell you, really in the last 3 months, I've been at Princeton, I've been at MIT, I've been at Stanford, Ohio State. So that tells you a lot right there. Yeah. When I speak to graduate students, it's 50-50, usually men and women. Because when you get to that level, there's all that pressure of being a scholar. On the undergraduate level, I think especially if for young men, if they're the first generation in their family to go off to school, then they're going to be more susceptible to these imposter feelings. So certainly there are, young men who have these feelings just going into school.
And the factor that stands out to me, and again, I don't have the specific research connected to the imposter syndrome, but from my research, I would say that conscientiousness, that personality factor, being highly conscientious, would really be pushing this. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And then when you just think about the setting, when you're in college, you're being tested every day, literally, so it's a kind of an artificial, any school is, but especially if you were like one of the best and the brightest in high school, and then you go off to some school and you're surrounded by other people who are the best and the brightest, and you're like, gee, now who am I?
Right.
So you start questioning yourself.
Right. So this is something, and we'll talk about it, I think, in the next segment. I want to get to this for sure. If you're raising a high-achieving child, if you're managing or taking care of other people, how do we nurture that? But let's get back and give our viewers another tool to manage themselves and run through those 4 personal competence types that really show there are good reasons why we feel this way.
Right. What I find is that what is common amongst everybody who identifies with the imposter syndrome is that we have a distorted view of what it means to be competent. We have set this internal bar very high, and they're unsustainable. So, for example, there's the perfectionist. Okay. So in their rule book, everything must be flawless 100% of the time, or they're very hard on themselves.
Yes.
Then there is the person I call the expert. For them, it's not about quality. It's about the quantity of knowledge that they have. And if you identify with the expert, you can never have enough. So you're always, you want to wake up one day and feel like, now I'm an expert, so one more degree, one more book before you ever feel like you ever know enough. Then there's the soloist, the rugged individualist. That person feels like it only counts if I do everything myself. So a lot of, you'll see a lot of young people very stubbornly refuse to ask for coaching, for tutoring, for help, because they feel like I have to figure it out myself. They have to kind of prove that they can do it themselves. Mm-hmm. And then there's, I mentioned before, the natural genius. For that person, competence is all about ease and speed. So if they have to struggle, let's say math is difficult or writing is difficult, then they're very hard on themselves and they judge themselves as lacking because they feel like I should just master it and get it very quickly.
I find that so fascinating, and a piece of this that I'm kind of mapping on as we go, I've shared our EASY model with you, the engage, connect, challenge, enrich, but our community resiliency model.
Right.
That's available to all our viewers at communityresiliencyproject.org. It's available to see there and to download and look at that. But I'm listening to these descriptors and I'm mapping it on about ways that adults can help kind of fill these holes in kids and help kids fill it in themselves.
Right, interesting.
It is interesting. All right, so you're really talking about managing self-expectations here. Is that the tool that we're hearing in this?
Yeah, absolutely. It's about recognizing that everybody struggles from time to time. Not everything needs to be perfect, always. I always tell people, maintain the part that's healthy. If you're a perfectionist, you care deeply about quality. But you have to let go of this idea that you have to do that all the time, that everything needs to be perfect. If you're the expert, hold on to the part that says you value learning. But don't expect yourself to know everything all of the time. Mm-hmm. I always tell people, you're going to have an opportunity to feel stupid sometime in the next 24, 48, 72 hours. And if you don't, I'm scared for you because it means you've stopped learning or you're dead. And it should always be about how much can I learn, not how much I already know.
I'm feeling everyone taking a deep breath here as we just normalize this and talk about, what is normal and what to expect. So tip number 2 is to set realistic self-expectations. And we're leading into this discussion that I want to have. Do you have people in your life, a child, someone you manage, someone you love, that you can see this imposter syndrome in their life and you wonder, how can I help them? That's what we're going to talk about next. Hello, I'm Dr. Mollie Marti, and welcome back to Resiliency Matters. Today, we are visiting with Dr. Valerie Young, a leading expert on the imposter syndrome. And we're really talking about feeling like a fraud in your own success, in your own life. And how do you stop those thought patterns that are leading to that? And we've been kind of moving toward how do you help manage this in someone else's life? I know you work with a lot of businesses and managers, so they're seeing this in these young, driven professionals. But we're also talking to parents today. And how do you see this and recognize this in your teens or your children? Can you share some experiences or stories you've had about that?
Sure. Well, I think, and you may be more familiar with this than I am, but low effort syndrome, which is you see very bright young people who don't apply themselves. Mm-hmm. And unconsciously, I think the thinking there is better to be thought as lazy than stupid, yes. Which is just a response. And I was mentioning to you earlier that I had gotten an email from a mother whose daughter was picked up for drunk driving. And her daughter had dropped out of college, 6 credits away from graduating. And she admitted at the time that she felt like an imposter, that she didn't really belong in college. So there's all kinds of implications. If you see your child being horribly perfectionist, or if they are rejecting compliments all the time and explaining away their success, well, I just got lucky this time, because it's always the next test that they're afraid that's the big one where I'm going to fail. Mm-hmm. So they have all this anxiety leading up to each one, and then they usually knock it out of the park, and then the cycle repeats itself over and over.
Okay, so you're looking at patterns of minimizing success, kind of letting that not being able to take compliments, not being able to celebrate successes. And you're looking at high anxious patterns. And then it sounds like you could even be looking at drug or alcohol use or some numbing. There's some numbing.
Sabotage. There's different ways that we might sabotage our success because that's stressful. So, showing up late for something, for an important test or not studying. There's different ways we kind of sabotage our own success because we don't feel deserving and we don't want to take that chance of succeeding or failing.
Yeah. And it's just so sad for me to even go inside that young woman's head and think, okay, those are my choices, lazy or stupid.
Yeah.
Lazy's safer, and to self-sabotage in that way. Mm-hmm. So what is the number one tip? I'm going to put you on the spot. What is the number one tip you would give to parents, to managers, to people who have loved ones that are exhibiting this behavior? What can we do to help?
Well, because I think there is so much shame around these feelings. We think we're the only one who feels this way. So to let people know you're not different, you're not even special. So there was one study that found 70% of people have these feelings. So maybe we should be studying the other 30,
Oh, maybe
right?
so. It's kind of like Lake Wobegon, where everybody is above intelligence and above.
Yeah, so it's just so remarkably common. So if you can demystify it by talking about it, like, oh, that's that imposter thing. Oh, I felt that. Your dad felt that, or I felt that, or your uncle felt that. Mm-hmm. And all these famous people feel that, and it's really normal. And that can be so liberating. I mean, the first time I heard there was a term, that in self was liberating. Yeah. Because there's that silence. You feel like you're alone. So just breaking the silence is, in and of itself, is huge.
It's huge. And psychologists have a big fancy name for that, like we do for everything, normalize. Mm-hmm. But it's really just being real and authentic and vulnerable and sharing your experience. And you can really just feel, like I said, that collective deep breath. Really? Mom, you've had these feelings? You've thought this way?
Yeah, and if you're watching TV with your child and you see someone on TV, like I saw Denzel Washington being interviewed, and he said before he stepped onto the stage on Broadway for mm-hmm. the big hit Fences, he said, when you're in the wings, if you don't have that what the heck am I doing here moment, then it's time to hang it up. So those are good teaching moments. Did you hear what he said? He's nervous, but he's going to keep going. He's going to go out on stage anyway.
Yes, and there's so much to that, to teaching them how to move through the fear and mm-hmm. to take those risks and those challenges. Yep. You have spent a lot of time in organizations and schools across the country. What are the costs? I'm interested both individually and to organizations. This comes at what price to us?
I think a huge price because it shows up in different ways. For some people, it's flying under the radar. So they don't raise their hand. They don't ask questions. They don't volunteer ideas. So if you're going to school and you're not asking questions, you're missing out on all kinds of learning opportunities. You're not going for advanced positions. You're not challenging yourself. And then there's a financial cost down the road. Or often people who feel like imposters procrastinate. Mm-hmm. And that's another way to protect yourself. Because if you wait to the very last minute and the results are bad, you have a built-in excuse because it really didn't represent your best efforts. But the rub is if the results are good and you're successful, then you feel like a fraud because you feel like, phew, I fooled them again.
Again, yeah.
Or workaholism. Very often a coping mechanism is people, they get into the cycle of studying harder, working longer than anybody else. And after a while, you burn out. But they think they have to work harder because everyone else is smarter than them. And that's the only way they can be successful.
There are enormous costs, really, on an individual and organizational
Absolutely.
basis. Okay. And what, I know you're speaking, you're here locally and you're speaking and you were sharing with me some of the things you're going to share, but there's a kind of a bonus tip when you said this is really, my final piece of advice on this. What is that?
The bonus tip is to keep going, regardless of how confident you feel, regardless of, all the fear stuff. People think, when I'm more confident, then I'll take more risks. But it doesn't work that way. You have to just do things differently mm-hmm. and then realize you can do it. Fall down, get up, fail, learn from the failure, but just keep going regardless of the situation or how scary it is. Just keep going.
That's a very good tip to end on. So that was our third tip. Normalize imposter feelings for others. Normalize those feelings of self-doubt. So our 3 tips with you today are reframe failure by focusing on effort and growth, set realistic expectations, and then normalize those imposter feelings with a bonus tip of just keep going. This is Dr. Mollie Marti. Thank you for watching Resiliency Matters on MediaCom MC22, your local programming leader.